She comes back to consciousness on the shoulder of a deserted road with her throat burning and her abdomen open to the air. The pain is so sharp it makes her vision pulse, but something steadier pushes through it. If she stays where they left her, she will bleed out alone. Alison Botha forces herself upright, clamps a hand to her stomach, and makes a decision that has nothing to do with bravery and everything to do with survival. She has to move. Alison was 27 in December of 1994, living in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. She worked as an insurance broker, built a life around friends and family, and moved through days that felt predictable. On the night of December 18th, she spent time out and was dropped off near her neighborhood late at night. She walked toward home expecting the last minutes to be uneventful, the simple relief of turning a key and stepping inside. Two men approached her and took that away. Franz Dutoit and Theuns Kruger forced her into a vehicle, threatened her, and drove her away from familiar streets to a secluded area where there would be no witnesses. What followed was a prolonged assault. She was beaten and stabbed repeatedly. She was sexually assaulted. Dutoit slashed her throat so deeply it nearly decapitated her. They cut into her abdomen and opened her body, leaving her organs exposed. When they were finished, they believed she was dead. Alison drifted in and out. When she fully surfaced again, she realized she could still think. She could still feel herself breathing, even though it came with a wet, bubbling sound she could not ignore. The wound in her neck had opened a path for air, and every breath reminded her how close she was to losing it. Shock did not feel dramatic. It felt like a cold distance that could turn into unconsciousness without warning. She looked down and saw what had been done to her. The sight could have ended her will on the spot, but she treated it as a problem that had to be managed. She used her hands to push her intestines back into her abdomen. She held them in place with torn clothing, pressing fabric and skin together as if she could make her body obey. She wrapped more material around her neck to slow the bleeding. She kept pressure where she could, knowing she could not repair the damage, only delay it. Then she began to crawl. The stretch of road was unlit and quiet. The silence magnified everything. The scrape of her body against gravel, the shallow rasp of her breathing, the rush of blood in her ears. She focused on small goals. Reach the edge of the pavement. Keep your eyes open. Keep your hands where they need to be. Each movement sent fresh pain through her body, but pain was information. It meant she was still alive. When her arms trembled and her strength faltered, she stopped only long enough to reset her grip, tighten the cloth at her waist, and keep going. At moments, she lost time, slipping into darkness, then forcing herself back. She fought the urge to lie down. She fought panic. She fought the strange temptation to let go and let the road take her. Later, she described separating herself into parts. One part that wanted to collapse, and another part that gave orders. The part that gave orders kept winning. At one point, she managed to stand. Her legs shook, and the world tilted, but standing meant she could cover ground faster. She began to stagger forward, one step at a time, holding her abdomen together with her hands and the torn fabric. Air leaking through her throat wound made speaking difficult, but she stayed focused on movement, on staying upright, on keeping blood inside her body for just a little longer. Eventually, headlights appeared. A motorist saw a figure in the road and stopped. Alison collapsed as help finally arrived. Paramedics were called and later described the scene as unlike anything they had seen. A woman with catastrophic injuries who was still alive, still conscious enough to communicate, still fighting. She was rushed to the hospital, where surgeons took over. In intensive care, she was kept under close watch as doctors fought infection and monitored blood pressure and breathing. A tube helped protect her airway, while the damage to her throat healed enough for surgeons to rebuild it. Even after the immediate danger passed, her body was exhausted, and every small improvement came with setbacks that could have turned fatal overnight. Her injuries were extensive. She had lost massive amounts of blood. The cut to her neck was so deep that only a narrow strip of tissue prevented complete severing of vital structures. Her voice box and surrounding tissue were badly damaged. Her abdominal wall had been opened and had to be reconstructed. Doctors worked to control bleeding, prevent infection, and secure her airway. She was taken into surgery and then back again, the kind of relentless medical effort reserved for patients whose bodies have been torn beyond anything she should have survived. In the hours after surgery, doctors monitored her for infection and organ failure. Each system in her body had been strained. Breathing was assisted. Fluids and blood were replaced. Pain management became a careful balance between relief and awareness. She could not simply be declared safe because she had survived the operating room. Her body had to keep surviving every hour after that, as swelling, blood loss, and contamination threatened to undo what the surgeons had repaired. For her loved ones, the hospital time was its own nightmare. They waited for updates, watched machines breathe and beep, and tried to understand how a person could be so badly injured and still be there. Alison's survival was not a single moment. It was a long sequence of moments, each one requiring her body to hold on. Against what many would expect, she lived. While she recovered, investigators built the case. Alison was able to provide details about her attackers. Police reconstructed the route, collected physical evidence, and matched it to her account. Franz Dutoit and Theuns Kruger were arrested. Both eventually confessed, removing any doubt about what had been done and what they intended. They had assumed there would be no witness. They were wrong. In court, the violence was laid out in controlled, factual terms: medical findings, timelines, and confessions. Alison testified, facing the men who had tried to erase her. She spoke about what happened without embellishment, the way a survivor often does when the facts are already horrific enough. In 1995, both men were convicted of rape, attempted murder, and kidnapping, and were sentenced to life imprisonment. After sentencing, the story did not end for Alison. Recovery meant repeated medical care and the slow rebuilding of basic functions, including speaking. It meant relearning what her body could do and testing those limits day by day. It meant learning how to sleep again, how to enter a room without scanning every corner, how to live with the knowledge of what had been done to her. Over time, she chose to speak publicly, not to soften what happened, but to describe survival as it really is: painful, uneven, and real. On that road, with her throat cut and her body opened, Alison Botha made practical decisions that kept her moving until someone saw her and stopped. Her survival remains one of the most documented examples of extreme human endurance. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more stories of those who faced the impossible and lived.